All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Health Innovator series by SoMeDocs. We're bringing to life all of these amazing conversations with physician innovators. And so today is no different. On this episode, I would like to introduce you all to Dr. Dana Rice. And I will actually let her introduce herself and tell us a bit about your training. So Dr. Dana Rice, thank you so much for being here. And let's get right to the point. Please let us know about your training.
All right, perfect. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for doing this. It's always great to get information out and for docs to know about other docs and what possibilities are out there. Training-wise, I did med school at GW. I am a Massachusetts girl, and I went to UMass Amherst back in the day when basketball was king there. And I ended up staying at GW for residency. So I did my urologic training at GW as well. So I'm sort of homebred to the Washington, D.C. area at this point, even though I am truly a Massachusetts girl at heart.
Okay, wonderful. And we're going to move on next to your innovation, which if you're watching this on YouTube, then you don't really see the written section. But if you go to doctorsonsocialmedia.com, you can see everything that Dr. Rice has described about her innovation. So let's quickly, before we dive into you as the human behind the innovation, talk about your specific innovation. Tell us a bit about it.
Okay, so being a urologist and being a female, right? I ended up going into practice. I'm in private practice right outside DC at a very large health system called Innova. And there were not very many female urologists in the area at the time that I started. And a lot of females like to see females. So as I started coming out, I started seeing so many cases throughout the day of recurrent UTIs or urethritis or pelvic pain or things that just needed help. And I was always surprised, how did you get to me? Right? I'm a surgeon by training, right? How did it get to a point where people who have basic medical needs had to come to me to get a good sex talk or a menopause talk or, hey, start tracking things, start figuring out what your behavioral changes are. So I dove into my innovation because I was always shocked by the patients that I would see through residency and then ultimately private practice where they just had misinformation. Right? Women have been told throughout their lives it's because you wore thongs or pantyhose or all these things, and then they Google it and it just gets reinforced. So my innovation really started back when I was doing pediatrics in residency, where moms had to sort of write down how many UTIs their kids had. And as a mom now of a kid who has UTIs, it makes sense. Those moms go crazy, right? Like, I don't know how many E. coli cultures, I don't know what's going on. Why is the doctor asking me like I'm a dummy? I just don't know. And it really wasn't fair. So back then it was, God, longer ago than I want to admit, but it was before apps and all those things were super popular. So initially I thought the idea would be a website kind of following the early period tracker type stuff. And then as it evolved and apps became more popular and I got into life a little bit more, I realized, hey, we need an education resource with good information, accurate information, as well as a way to help people keep track of their medical records that makes sense, right? Telling someone to bring in a whole bunch of printed out urine cultures may or may not make sense to them. But if you show them how to do it and make it easy and point click, then you get a whole lot more information that makes everybody more happy. So when I had my second child, I had a little bit of time. I took about 6 weeks off. And as someone who's used to being overly busy, I said, okay, now we're going to do an app. And it's not just this website idea I had anymore. And that's how it came about. And I dove in with no business plan, no really anything to do with apps other than the apps I used myself. My husband is, he does advertising and marketing and things like that. So he had friends who had friends, and that's how I got into it.
I really, really love that, especially because of what I'm building through SoMeDocs and because I see the pain point of today's society, needing information and getting it so quickly, but not always getting it from the expert sources. So I'm sure that everybody's going to join me when they watch in thanking you and feeling good about the fact that an expert, like literally the expert of UTIs, is creating something like this.
Well, I mean, I think that's your movement, right? What you're doing. Like doctors need to take control of the narrative here a little bit because, you know, you can go on lots of websites that are great for history and things like that, but they may not always have the most accurate medical information. And then the other thing is some of this is the art of medicine, right? AUA guidelines, ACOG guidelines, there's a lot of things on how to manage UTIs. But if you ask, you know, older gray haired people, which unfortunately I've now started to become, you know, it doesn't always fit, right? So there are little tips and tricks that do no harm, but could do a lot of good. And if you just can get that word out too, you know, it's great. And for such a mass problem like urinary tract infections,
Right.
you know, I would like to say, sure, everybody come to my office and I will charge you for a visit and this will be great and lucrative for me. But we have to get back to doing what's good for society and people, right? I went into this to help people. So if I can reach more people, that's what I want to do.
Well, I love that. And I love that as in someone who trained in internal medicine and a former primary care physician. UTIs are like so common. We're so common in my office. To know as a physician that there exists a resource out there for patients to be able to click into and get information straight from the urologist source is just so comforting. And I can easily imagine a lot of other primary care doctors like giving the website out if there was a need, if there were people that were coming in. And so this is such a valuable resource. So you touched a little bit on the gray hair, and I have to say that you and me both, because no one's getting younger here. So speaking of us, who are you? Tell us a little bit about the you behind the white coat.
Yeah, sure. So I am a mother, wife, daughter, surgeon, friend, right? I wear about 90,000 hats, and probably like most people who are watching this, you know, I plugged on through, right? Like I did schooling, I did training, I had to build a practice. I threw an app in there. I knocked out a couple kids. You know, my husband been along for the ride and a big support system for me. And now I'm getting to a point where I'm like, oh yeah, what do I do? How do I do things? Who am I? You know, I still run, I still work out. I would happily be on a beach 24/7. And if someone has a house in St. John's, they want to supply to me forever, and I'll be your urologist on that island any day.
Right.
But you know, some of the fun things that I used to do aren't real relevant right now, right? Like I desperately wanted to do cage dives with sharks when I was 20, and I scuba dived through Australia, but I got a 5 and an 8-year-old. Like I have enough life insurance, but maybe not that much. So that's out for a little while, right? So behind the white coat, I sort of reevaluated a little bit in COVID as well for what I really wanted. And I am happy that I worked like a maniac to get myself fairly comfortable for my families while my kids were little, because I know everyone says you'll miss the baby years, but I don't particularly like baby years. It's very difficult for me to have a crying person not tell me what they like. The snuggles, yes. The crying, I could do without. But as they get older now, my 8-year-old, you know, she swims for a summer swim team, and I want to make it. And I'm there enough. I do take calls, so I'm not there all the time, and I can't say that I will ever be there all the time. But as they get older, I really want to be home a little bit more. I will always still be a full-time practicing urologist, I think, just by the nature of how busy I am. But I want to make a 6 o'clock swim meet. I want to cheer her on. I want her to know that if she decides to do 4 a.m. swim practice, I will be the person that schleps her there before work. So behind the white coat, I am someone who's still trying to figure out what the next stage is. And, you know, my husband is fantastic and we have fun together, and thank God he is an active guy too, because sometimes the way we catch up at night is my mom, who has had strokes, lives with us. So we give her the baby monitors when everybody's in bed because she can't hear everybody from her room. And we go out for a walk or a run or things like that. And that's how I spend my time. And my friends, unfortunately, right now are on the West Coast, some of my really great best girlfriends. So I'm hoping this year we can catch up and travel a little bit, because I have very good friends in the area, but my, you know, ride and die buddies are sort of away right now. So I got to get back to visiting them.
Well, along those lines, run us through your day. Maybe there's something interesting that you do in your private life.
Oh, God. So weekends, I like to do anything adventuresome. So we can, you know, we have little blow up kayaks, and we can go to Great Falls, which is a nice little park near us. We hike. My kids like to bike ride, and my husband and I jog behind them, which as they get older is getting to be not possible as much anymore. But when they were little, it was fantastic. But on an every average day, I think I'm probably like most surgeons, right? I wake up early. My kids are still asleep. I go to work. I round at the hospital. I either go to the office after that, or I operate all day, and I try to make it home for dinner. I'm fortunate enough, like I said, my mom lives with me, so my mom and my husband sort of take care of dinner. So I don't have to do that. I can just be mom and play with the kids. Bath time, put them down. My husband and I go out and either work out together or I work out separate. Epic is great, but hurts my soul a little bit. So I'm back on charting at night. And then hopefully my girlfriends are still awake on the West Coast. We chat sometimes and do it all again the next day. So I really have been in a bit of a grind for a while. And when I work on the app and I work on different things, I literally just manage juggling. Like Monday night at 8:00, I did an educational conference with the people who I've sold the app to, and I'm working with. So I just juggle what I can when I can.
Fabulous. And is there a specific interaction you've had in your life that has helped shape this particular venture?
Yeah, I mean, so I actually had vesicoureteral reflux. So I was a baby in the 70s who was sick, and thankfully they figured it out. And Alan Reddick at Children's Hospital, who was kind of one of the urology pediatric godfathers, did my surgery when I was only about 9 months old. So I was surgically corrected pretty early. So I don't have too many problems, I have no problems. My 20s were a little hard for UTIs, but that's about it. And if people are familiar with vesicoureteral reflux, it can run in families. Sometimes it's often associated with blonde-haired blue eyes, which I follow in my trend. And my oldest daughter also had vesicoureteral reflux. So she had to be on antibiotics. You know, back in my day, they treated you with surgery. Now they can get you through a lot of times with antibiotics, although some people need surgery. So UTIs were something I was very familiar with. And then I also I nannied out in the Hamptons actually to help pay for college a lot of years. I had an old boyfriend who was out there and introduced me to a family so I could work in the summers. And they're like my second family, but they are very forward thinking for different, adventures and stuff like that. So I talked to the dad that I nannied for, and I was like, what do you think? Is this something? He's like, hey, if it makes sense to you and something that you would have used in a way that would help you, he's like, go for it. And so I did. So I tried to make the app user friendly, not only for an education purpose, but also for a mom of people with UTIs and someone who's had UTIs. So I tried to put in little things that I would have done.
That's great. It's such a great way to create something useful, is just what's people's pain points. Is there a need for it? So it sounds like you really, that was an interaction that helped you tap into that. Is there a really interesting part of your life?
God, yeah. So probably a few. I mean, interesting is always a strange thing for me, right? So I would say I have pockets of interesting. So when I was younger, my father actually passed away early. So that was an interesting lifestyle change. And I think that probably taught me a lot of work ethic, right? Because I went from having things sort of, 2 parents, 2 kids, to everything to a little bit different. So I definitely got have a very good work ethic because of that event in my life. I wouldn't give up my 20s for anything, although I'm not sure I would call them overly productive. I did not go directly to medical school. I played around a whole lot. I lived in Manhattan. I nannied for cash, and I used that cash in lots of different ways. And although my experience was not quite nanny diaries, there were occasionally private planes and things like that I got to experience a different type of living that was unbelievable. And I wouldn't change seeing that side of life for anything. I'm not sure I want to live at that level ever. But it was just fun.
Wow.
And then med school was a big transition back into, here you go, got to work again. It's not exactly the same. And then residency, friends forever, right? Like when you live and sleep in the same call rooms as people every other night for 6 years, and, it sounds cliche, you're not in urology, we do save lives, but like, it was those horrible trauma calls where you're like, oh my God, why am I doing 2 years of general surgery? That really gets you kind of through. And I met my husband. I met him in Jamaica randomly. I was on a girls' trip. He was on a family trip. That's really fun. I've lived in Australia in college for, God, that's 9 months or so. And I went to school kind of pretty much scuba dived up and down. So I've done a lot of fun things that I have no regrets for. Could have saved a little more money in my 20s, but c'est la vie.
So that's interesting. A quick question on what you said. You said, I wouldn't want that lifestyle. So interesting. Why? The ones that you nannied for?
Oh, the people I nannied for themselves are fine. They kind of kept it in check. But because they had so many friends who were either celebrities or super bankers or different kinds of things, right? I even where I live outside of DC, I have a really hard time finding a way to ground my kids. Not literally punish them, but like keep them in a normal spirit, right? Because we have an au pair because of my work hours. And when I hear my kids say, oh, she doesn't have an au pair, like it's a weird thing. I'm like, like you're killing me, kid, or like my daughters will be like, can't you go on Amazon and just order it, Mom? No. Do you have the cash? Because if you don't have cash, you're not getting something on Amazon. Like this is not the easy way to do it. And they're only 5 and 8. So I find it very hard and not that my work ethic has to be everybody else's. Like sometimes I'm a crazy workaholic, or probably am a crazy workaholic, but I do think that you need to feel a little hunger to stay motivated. And it's hard to constantly change your mindset into, I want to do more, or how can I do more without the fear of failing? And I think that some of that in me comes from the need to, well, crap, if I fail, it's no worse off than I am now, right? And I think when you are uber rich, uber wealthy, and your kids are used to private planes or, not waiting in traffic because they take a helicopter out to the Hamptons or things like that, it's a little harder to say, hey, go work for your money. And now they probably never will have to, but I don't want that. I want my kids to know what it's like to have to, pull up by the bootstraps a little bit and get yourself out there. Because I think that if you've always kind of been handed stuff, that failure feels so much worse. And
wow,
I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Oh, it's not for this show, but that so resonates with me. I imagine a lot of people, also physicians that were watching this might resonate with, but super resonates with me. My husband and I constantly speak about this, we're a dual physician family, and also, having achieved, how do you keep children grounded and give as we should, because we've earned our, a place in life, and yet not give because they need the hunger. Totally resonates.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to something more fun. Are you team coffee or are you team tea? And let us know specifics.
So I am team tea because when I was in Australia, they introduced me to tea, and I was neither coffee or tea before that. And then when I was in Australia, I was cream and sugar, and I guess one of my roommates, I don't know. And then I came home and I was like, oh, I can't do this much cream and sugar in my life. So I am literally plain black tea unless I'm somewhere and I think, oh, English breakfast sounds great. I don't know. I'm more a keep me warm kind of tea drinker than I am a crave it kind of tea drinker. But I will also say that I am naturally hyper, and I'm not sure that anyone wants to see me on too many cups of coffee.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Good explanation. All right. Second to last question. So tell us a resource, something that you're enjoying, something you're learning from. And it doesn't have to be a book. It could be a podcast or a TV show, but something that really stands out to you.
Yeah, so I'm in a funny place right now going on with work and some different things. So the Negotiate Her podcast, which is another female MD, I actually kind of dove into that a little bit because I was like, hey, maybe this is a skill I don't have. And then I realized, oh, it's not a maybe. It's for sure a skill you don't have.
Right.
So now I've kind of picked up some books to I'm going on vacation in August. So my intent is to kind of get in there and see if I can speak up a little bit for myself. I mean, I'm obviously a very outgoing person, and I don't hold my tongue for anything. And I don't know if showing all my cards all the time has necessarily served me as well in the medicine machine that is starting to go through. So I'm going to try to figure out how to grow and sort of change my influence on a room, right? Instead of like, oh, that's Dr. Rice, you know what you get with her, you get it all the time, and this is what it is, which is something I value in my home life and my honesty approach to life. I just think sometimes people take that as a little bit of overwhelming in medicine. And I want to figure out as I go forward in my career and with the sale of the app and things like that, how I can better serve myself to negotiate for myself better.
Fabulous. I love that. I love that. All right. Last but not least, we're not highlighting weaknesses or pitfalls because we want to make our guests feel bad, but we do it because we feel that you are succeeding and that we can learn from you in terms of the pitfalls that you've experienced. So is there a pitfall or a weakness that you can share with us that has taught you to be stronger?
Yeah, so in life, there's a million, but I think most relevant for this group is probably with relationships to how my business profile or my business plan went with my app. I went in with a save the world, educate the world kind of mentality. I did not go in with how this is going to be good for me kind of mentality, or how I put in hours of work and does this turn into something lucrative, or is this just, here it is to the world. And I just didn't know everything that would go into being a business owner and starting an app. And then, as I mentioned, I've recently started working with another company. It's called Utivia. They do supplements for UTIs as well as some other things. And they're a lovely group of people. And I've sold the app to them and I'm working with them and consulting. But just to see how their business plans and I get a blog done at midnight because that's when I have time to do it. Whereas they have like a set schedule and people to help them and editors and things like that. So I think the biggest pitfall of being an entrepreneur is if you have no business experience or you haven't worked with business models, you really need to find a good support staff and a good lawyer to help you kind of figure out what it's going to take. Because yes, we're smart people and we can learn this, but learning it all while you have a full-time career, a full-time parent and a wife ends up being so much more work. So that's what I would suggest for everybody is know what your weakness is. And my weakness was definitely business plans, selling myself, negotiating contracts for myself, trying to figure out where to go with the next steps. And it got frustrating. So I ended up making decisions which down the road, I'm sure they're going to be fine. But at the time I was like, oh, did I miss an opportunity because I didn't pit this contract against this contract when I was talking about my sales and of the app. And I probably could have, and I didn't.
Great advice. Great advice. All right. We're going to wrap up the show by allowing you to, let us know about an ask of yours. So stage is yours.
I think the biggest ask I have is, like I said, it's Utivia. So it's UTIVA is the spelling. And they're the company that I sold the UTI tracker to. And they are starting to get the word out and market it. So I think my biggest ask would be for any of the primary cares, OBs, internists, urologists, anybody who works with UTIs, take a look at the app, see what you like, what you don't like, how it could work. Because the idea is when they start pushing this through or marketing this, that it's something that is useful and is a good resource. And, we're always looking for changes or adds or subtracts, and it's not perfect. So I'm always looking for help.
Okay, fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Dana Rice, for being part of our series and for hopping on this interview.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Sure.